I would now like to introduce the next speaker, an outstanding military officer with a distinguished career in the Sri Lanka Army. He is Major General Kamal Gunaratna. He was enlisted to the Sri Lanka Army in 1981, and commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1982, having attended several local courses and also courses conducted in foreign countries, most notably among them was the Command and Staff course in the Staff College of Pakistan and the National Defence College course in the National Defence College of India. And he has held several staff positions and instructor appointments, and the most notable in terms of his sacrifice to protect the sovereignty of this country. He was the General Officer commanding 55 Infantry Division from 2006 to 2008, General Officer commanding 53 Division 2008 to 2009, and Colonel of the Regiment of Gajaba Regiment from 2008 to 2009, and later Commander Security Forces 1E from July 2009 to December 2010. He had held several government positions, the Coordinating Officer of Puttalam District Tsunami Relief Operations and Competent Authority for Internally Displaced Persons in the Northern Province. He also had got a lot of awards: Ranavikrama Padakkama, Ranasura Padakkama, Deshaputra Padakkama, and Uttama Seva Padakkama. I would now request Major General Kamal Gunaratna to make his address.
Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Professor G.L. Piris, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Honorable Parliamentarians, Dr. Subramaniam Sami, past commanders, Chief of Defence Staff and Service Commanders, Excellencies and distinguished guests, good afternoon. The sequence of my presentation will be as shown on the screen. Nation states, including world superpowers, have taken different approaches to counter insurgencies within and outside their countries. In spite of manpower, material superiority, advanced technology and long-term commitment, most of these approaches have not achieved tangible gains. At a time when global security is being threatened by various forms of terrorism, Sri Lanka has proved its formula of eradicating terrorism, innovating and introducing new concepts for countering insurgencies. Nearly 3 decades of internal conflict that engulfed Sri Lanka ended decisively with the security forces defeating the terrorism and reducing the LTTE down to an ideology in May 2009. Vavuniya was the launching pad of the 1E humanitarian operation, and Security Forces 1E, Security Forces Headquarters 1E played the pivotal role in operational and administrational aspects. Ladies and gentlemen, the area of responsibility of 1E during the humanitarian operation is as shown on the screen. Towards the end of the conflict, LTT forced the entire civilian population to go together with their cadres and held civilians as hostages to prevent the security forces defeating them. These civilians were used as a human shield too to launch attacks against the security forces. Civilians withdrew from their lands, leaving the properties and generation-long harvested wealth behind due to the fear of death. They carried the bare minimum for survival, and out of which are the most precious. Even they carried roofs of their houses to find shelter elsewhere, which had become a dream during their deadliest march. Evacuation attempts of these civilians with the negotiations by INGOs such as UN, ICRC, SLMM and many other NGOs and religious organizations did not materialize due to LTT's objections. However, at every given opportunity, civilians were encouraged by the troops to escape from the clutches of the LTTE and enter to the security forces controlled area. With the progress of the security forces, thousands of affected civilians started fleeing to seek refuge under the government. Frontline troops were instructed to receive these civilians with utmost care and to provide them with essential needs. It was assessed that the damage and destruction done by the LTTE to the properties of the civilians and to the infrastructure were colossal. Areas liberated were highly contaminated with mines. Civilians were with the post-war trauma. The situation was not conducive for immediate resettlement. Hence, as per the action plan made by the government, forecasting the requirement, initially they were transferred to the transit camps located within the vicinity of Vanni, and concurrently they were transferred to well-organized Manik Farm relief villages. Taking care of such a large number of IDPs was obviously a daunting task. The government once again heavily relied upon the security forces. His Excellency the President immediately appointed the competent authority for IDPs in the northern province, a 2-star general, to take care of all activities related to IDPs and house them properly. His endeavor was guided by the Presidential Task Force headed by a senior minister. I was honored to be the successor for firstly appointed competent authority. Initially, we faced many challenges and many administrative nightmares. However, we managed to overcome all these challenges with the sheer commitment of our troops, with the proper guidance given by the government, NGOs and INGOs. To enhance the infrastructure facilities already provided by the government at Manik Farm, UN agencies and other NGOs were grouped into 3 clusters according to the UN system of operating, namely food cluster, shelter cluster and wash cluster, to facilitate the requirement. Under these clusters, the agencies did a commendable task. It was obvious that without their assistance, this would be another terrifying experience to the government. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 clusters are as shown on the screen. Food cluster, shelter cluster and wash cluster, the combination of government, NGOs and INGOs. Manik Farm was visited by over 150 delegations, including UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. While welfare facilities like cooperatives, banks, post office and schools, etc. were prepared at Manik Farm, government extended an invitation to Professor Walter Kalin, UN Special Representative for the Rights of the IDPs, to visit. His report was extremely constructive and highly commended the effort taken by the government and other agencies to make the IDPs comfortable. During the visit of UN Secretary General, he was pleased to see the facilities provided for IDPs. By doing all possible to create the situation for IDPs happy living, we should not forget the role played by the Sinhalese people in South. They were all alarmed with the needs of these fellow citizens of the country and volunteered to help in full swing. They were encouraged by the patriotism and lent their hands with fatherly and brotherly feeling. The mammoth task of reconstruction and resettlement, with the directions of the Presidential Task Force, and with the help of government authorities, became the prime responsibility of the competent authority. Hence, it is important to confirm the definitions by virtue of understanding. Moreover, the point to consider is reconstruction and resettlement cannot be achieved without stabilization. Ladies and gentlemen, the definitions of reconstruction, stabilization, and resettlement are as shown on the screen. Now let's get on to the reconstruction in Vanni. Mainly there are 5 sectors as components of an integrated approach to stability and reconstruction. Government has an important role in each of these sectors, so attention to restoring, rebuilding and reforming the public sector in post-conflict societies is critical to achieving the end state conditions of reconstruction. Let us examine the areas that were crucial for the reconstruction. No one looking to the village, state or nation willingly wants to be victimized by crime or to live in a society without laws, freedom, a chance to prosper or access to decent schools, well-run hospitals and carefully maintained roads. The security forces in Vanni realized that without security and law and order, the other government functions cannot be fulfilled. Therefore, the stabilization operations conducted by the security forces in Vanni focused mainly on disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, engaged in a combination of rebuilding, professionalizing and reforming the government infrastructure with their civilian partners. After the defeat of the LTTE, hopes of the people of Vanni skyrocketed for a safe and secure environment. The security forces identified the risk areas, low risk areas and no risk areas, and divided the areas of responsibility of each security forces headquarters into sectors, and the authority was further delegated to respective division commanders and so on down to battalion level. With the help of intelligence services, security forces identified the LTT cadres who were disguised among the IDPs and took them in for rehabilitation, so that the innocent IDPs had no trouble in starting their lost lives. The security forces recovered huge caches of arms hidden by terrorists, which were very potent, lethal and capable of causing lots of damage to the life and property, thus created an arms-free environment for the IDPs to come and resettle and to live in peace. The preliminary condition of good governance is the establishment of the rule of law. In order to enforce the rule of law, the areas were selected and police stations were established. Vanni people who were deprived of the services of the legitimate police force welcomed this move and started developing trust towards the law enforcing authorities. Social well-being is an end state in which basic human needs are met and people are able to coexist peacefully in communities with opportunities for advancement. This end state is characterized by equal access to and delivery of basic needs, services, the provision of primary and secondary education, the return or resettlement of those displaced by violent conflict, and the restoration of social fabric and community life. Without basic necessities such as food or shelter, large-scale social instability will persist because people will be unable to resume the functions of normal life, sustaining a livelihood, traveling safely, engaging in community activities or attending schools. All these areas were very clearly studied by the government and security forces in Vanni, were tasked to create conditions and coordinate these activities with INGOs and government departments. Societies emerging from civil war are typically traumatized by exceptional violence. Demonstration of a commitment to human rights against extrajudicial killings, torture, disappearances, and respect for human values is critical to create this kind of confidence. Human rights thus appear as an early and continuous priority. The government allowed all human rights organizations to come into Vanni region and look into this aspect to ensure the human rights are protected. The concept of governance is as old as human civilization. Governance is the process of decision making and the process by which decisions are implemented or not implemented. The government has the concern for ensuring responsive, accountable, transparent, decentralized and people-friendly administration at all levels. A prime concern of the government in Vanni was to give primacy to removal of unemployment and to an accelerated development of infrastructure with expedited implementation of policies and programs in accordance with the national interest. Inviting investors into the region to start commercial activities was one of the priorities in government agenda. Ensuring a safe and secure environment for the investors to come was one of the primary responsibilities that was vested upon the military. The labor, both organized or unorganized, skilled or unskilled, is a proud partner in the production of the nation's wealth and in its progress. Other than the normal civil laborers, the military recommended the employment of rehabilitated ex-combatants who were reintegrated into the society with sufficient vocational training by giving them more opportunities. The government's new investment and institutional thrust to agriculture, the self-employed, the unincorporated sector, infrastructure development and housing acted as the vehicle for massive employment creation at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, now let us get on to the resettlement in Vanni. Having caused sufficient hardships for the population and the economy of the country, the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka left hundreds of thousands of people in transit, displaced and seeking refuge with host families or in temporary relief villages. During and after the end of the conflict, the IDPs as well as residence populations in affected regions of Vanni remained highly exposed to a range of risks due to the destruction of public infrastructure, absence of shelter, medical services, livelihood support and access to basic services. Resettlement became a huge task for the government of Sri Lanka. Nearly 300,000 IDPs resettling in their respective lands was not an easy task. Accordance with the fulfillment, following were the main challenges faced by the government and security forces in Vanni in resettlement of IDPs. However, a speedy resettlement was planned and implemented in stages. To achieve this, everybody in every government organization had to work round the clock to reach desired aspirations. The coordination between government officials, security forces and NGOs was done with the sheer interest to resettle these poor people as soon as possible. District secretaries were tasked to identify village and its people who were displaced. Then the mine action survey started to identify the contaminated areas in selected lands of the IDPs. Tasking was done by the Security Force Commander Vanni and the mine action team to ensure the areas are free of mines. Once the UNDP inspection was done, the land release certificate was issued by the UNDP declaring the land is free of mines and ready for occupation. On 5th August 2009, resettlement commenced. 1,087 IDPs were sent to their native areas in Jaffna, Batticaloa, Trincomalee and Ampare. Following were provided to each family on their resettlement, as shown on the screen. Once they reached their respective villages, they were kept in an intermediate transit camps for few days, allowing them to inspect their lands and put up a shelter. Meantime, access roads were repaired, wells were cleaned, and drinking water was provided. Other than the security forces, the government officials, NGOs, and respective ministers and parliamentarians also played their role religiously. In contrast, following are the most significant. At the reception of IDPs and aftermath of the public health was a major concern with all the communicable diseases. With very well established curative and preventive healthcare system, the government managed to overcome the health challenges in one knee. During the resettlement, army medical hospitals positioned in under-command formations have undertook number of medical clinics in the areas where there were no access to good medical facilities. With the progress of the resettlement, schools were renovated with the assistance of donors and other agencies, and troops provided manpower assistance. School equipment were provided by the government, well-wishers and INGOs. Over and above, number of programs were organized to donate school materials. Psychosocial centers were established in schools by military with the help of well-wishers in order to improve the mental, physical condition and psychosocial well-being of children in war-affected areas. Career counseling sessions were done for the young adults. Educational tours were arranged for children from remote areas to visit the countryside, which they have never seen. These trips covered Colombo, up-country, down south, etc. Security forces provided the transport, accommodation, and meals. Immediate steps were taken to renovate all the places of religious importance in multi-religion society by troops deployed in respective formations. The topmost priority was given to address the religious and cultural activities of the community. Further, similar to other areas of the country, programs were arranged for them to participate in cultural events. An administrative system was put in place, making use of the services of government officers before the commencement of resettlement. Many IDPs who had lost all their important documents, including birth certificates and national identity cards, during the long period of displacement. Therefore, the government took the initiative to fast-track the issuing of temporary ID cards to facilitate the movement of IDPs. Paddy fields and cultivating areas were cleared and handed over so that the people could start their usual ways of living. New buses and other transport means were introduced for the resettled people to move from place to place. More and more job opportunities were created, and many people joined the development work as skilled and unskilled labor. Now, it was quite evident that the leading role played by the government, being in hand with the security forces, to accomplish the gigantic task of reconstruction and resettlement by virtue of rebuild another nation of Sri Lanka. We are happy to say that almost 98% of the resettlement has been completed. However, we all need to understand that the biggest delay in the resettlement program was due to the demining requirement. However, as directed by the government, we are going all out to complete the resettlement program by end of August this year. Similarly, one should also remember and understand the most significant role played by the security forces of the country in the post-conflict scenario in assisting the government in the nation-building task to achieve peace and ethnic harmony, and especially unity among the diverse communities in our society. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the end of my presentation. I thank you all for patience hearing. Thank you.